People used to tell me my voice could make a room go still. Not because I was loud, not because I was dramatic, but because when I sang, people stopped whatever they were doing and turned toward me like they had just remembered something they had lost. At 17, that was the only kind of power I believed in. I was a senior at Brookfield Academy in Portland, a private arts school filled with beautiful, restless kids who all wanted to become something bigger than themselves. Dancers with bleeding toes, violinists with permanent marks on their shoulders, actors who practiced tears in mirrors. And me, Megan Carter, the scholarship girl with sheet music stuffed into a secondhand tote bag and a voice my instructors called rare. I lived for the stage lab on the third floor. The dusty black curtains, the warm lights, the old piano that always sounded slightly tired in the lower keys. That room felt more like home than the apartment I shared with my mother on the east side, where the radiator clanked at night and every dollar had a purpose before it even arrived. My mother believed in practical things.
Rent.
Groceries. Bus fare.
Keeping the lights on.
I believed in music, not in a childish, wishful way. I worked for it. I trained until my throat ached and my ribs felt bruised from breath control. I stayed after school to rehearse, took every performance slot they offered, and spent weekends singing jazz standards and musical theater pieces into the cracked mirror above my dresser. I wasn't chasing applause. I was chasing a life that belonged to me. Brookfield had started talking to me about conservatory auditions. One instructor mentioned New York. Another talked about Chicago. My vocal coach, Mrs. Bell, once squeezed my hands after rehearsal and said, "Megan, if you keep going, there will be rooms you haven't even dreamed of yet." That sentence lived inside me. Then Ryan Cole walked into my life and spoke to the part of me that wanted to be seen. I met him after a spring showcase downtown. I had just finished singing and was still half floating from the adrenaline when he approached me near the refreshment table. He was older than the boys at school by a few years, already out in the world, already polished. Dark coat, easy smile, the kind of confidence that didn't ask permission to exist. "You are the only real thing on that stage tonight," he said. It was such a precise compliment that I looked at him twice. Most people said things like "you sounded amazing" or "you have a beautiful voice." Ryan didn't. He talked like he understood performance, pressure, ambition. He said he worked as a junior financial analyst and attended the showcase because a client supported the school. He asked what I wanted after graduation, and when I told him I wanted to perform professionally, he didn't laugh or give me the tight, polite smile adults used when they thought you were unrealistic. He nodded like I had told him a fact.
"You will," he said.
"You've got that thing people can't teach." No one had ever said it quite like that. Ryan started showing up after that. Not in a pushy way. In a thoughtful way. He brought coffee before rehearsals when he knew I had early call time. He waited outside the building to walk me to the bus stop. He remembered details. Which composers I loved. Which shoes were hurting my feet. Which teachers intimidated me. He listened with his full attention, and for a girl used to fighting for space, that felt intoxicating. When I talked about auditions, he made them sound possible. When I doubted myself, he leaned in and told me I was meant for bigger stages. When I worried about money, he smiled and said, "You focus on the gift. Let the practical part come later." I should have noticed how much I loved hearing that. At school, everyone had an opinion. Some girls said I was lucky. Some said older men only chased younger girls because women their own age knew better. I brushed that off. Ryan never seemed predatory to me. He seemed certain, stable, protective in a way I mistook for safety. And I was tired of uncertainty. Tired of counting coins with my mother. Tired of pretending I wasn't scared of failing. Tired of being the girl who had talent but no connections, no money, no safety net. Ryan made the future sound less like a cliff and more like a bridge. One rainy evening, he took me to dinner at a quiet little place with candles and amber glass and white tablecloths I was afraid to touch. I wore my one decent dress and spent the first 10 minutes trying not to look like I didn't belong there. Ryan noticed, of course. He always noticed. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "One day," he said softly, "I'm going to sit in the front row of a theater and watch everyone else realize what I already know." I laughed because it sounded romantic and ridiculous. But he didn't laugh. I mean it, Megan. You're special. And I can help you get where you need to go. Not by changing you, by making sure the world stops overlooking you. I went home that night with my heart beating so hard it felt like a second pulse in my throat. No one had ever looked at me like I was both fragile and destined. No one had ever made me feel chosen. So when he kissed me for the first time a week later outside Brookfield's side entrance, with the wind cold against my cheeks and my music folder pressed to my chest, I kissed him back like stepping toward him was stepping toward the life I wanted. I did not know then that praise can be a leash if someone is patient enough to tighten it slowly. Back then, I thought Ryan Cole was the first person who truly believed in me, and that was how he got in. I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks before graduation, on a gray Thursday afternoon that smelled like wet pavement and coffee grounds. I had gone into a pharmacy near the bus stop because I was late, then later, then late enough that even I could no longer explain it away with stress. I still remember the way my hands shook opening the box in the tiny restroom at the back of a store. I remember the buzzing light overhead, the scratched metal dispenser on the wall, the cheap pink soap that smelled like flowers trying too hard. Mostly, I remember staring at those 2 lines until my vision blurred. For a long time, I just sat there with the test in my hand and my coat still on, as if I might stand up and walk back into the life I had entered with. The life with additions circled on my calendar. The life with graduation robes waiting in plastic. The life where every teacher I trusted kept saying the same thing. Don't slow down now. When I finally told Ryan, he was quiet for so long that the silence itself frightened me. We were in his car, parked under a row of bare trees outside my apartment. Rain tapped softly against the windshield while I kept my hands folded in my lap because I could feel panic rising through my chest like water. He stared ahead for several seconds, then exhaled slowly. Okay, he said. Just that.
Okay.
I turned toward him. Okay. He nodded, but his face had changed. Not angry. Not exactly. Just serious in a way I had never seen before. Older. Harder. This isn't what we planned, he said, but we'll deal with it.
We.
I clung to that word harder than I should have. I started talking too fast after that, hearing the fear in my own voice and hating it. I told him maybe I could still graduate, still audition, still defer for a semester if I had to. Maybe there were programs for young mothers. Maybe my mother could help sometimes. Maybe. Ryan reached over and stopped me by touching my wrist. Megan, he said gently, breathe.
So I did.
Then he gave me the first speech that would alter the course of my life. He said this didn't have to destroy my future. He said a baby was a blessing, not a catastrophe. He said real life did not move in perfect timing, and mature people understood that. He reminded me that careers could wait, but children could not. He asked whether I really wanted strangers raising our baby while I chased applause in another city. He said all of it calmly, reasonably, lovingly. That was what made it powerful. Because he never said don't sing. He never said give up your dream. He said words like for now and later, and once things settle. He made sacrifice sound temporary, noble, even, like I was being invited into womanhood, not pushed out of my own future. I wanted to believe him, so I did. A week later, he took me to meet his mother. Diane Cole lived in a house so neat it looked staged. Cream sofa, glass tables, books arranged by color. Not a single dish in the sink. She greeted me with a smile that never quite reached her eyes and hugged me lightly, as if she was handling something delicate she had not chosen to buy. I had heard about her, of course. Ryan described her as strong, opinionated, protective. The kind of mother who always had a view on everything from investments to restaurants to relationships. He said she could be intense, but that underneath it she only wanted the best for him. For him. The distinction mattered more than I understood then. She served tea in thin white cups and listened while Ryan explained the pregnancy in the careful voice of a man managing an inconvenient complication. Not cruelly, just strategically. When he finished, Diane set down her cup and looked at me, as if assessing whether I was salvageable. Well, she said, what's done is done. The shame of that sentence burned my face. Then she smiled. But perhaps this is for the best. I remember blinking at her. For the best. She folded her hands. A child gives a woman direction, structure, purpose. Girls your age get distracted by fantasies, recognition, careers, all that nonsense people fill their heads with. But motherhood clarifies things. I said carefully, music isn't nonsense to me. No, she said, still smiling. Of course not. It's a lovely hobby. And later, when the child is older, I'm sure there will be time for little performances again. Little performances. Ryan didn't correct her. That stayed with me. I looked at him, waiting for him to remind her that I wasn't talking about hobby nights and community recitals, that I had trained for years, that this was my path, that he, of all people, knew what music meant to me. Instead, he gave me that steady, soothing look I had come to depend on. She's just worried about stability, he said. And honestly, she's not wrong. Something inside me shifted then very slightly. Not enough to make me leave, just enough to make me cold. Over the next days, the pressure became a chorus. Ryan telling me I needed rest, not stress. Diane telling me schools and stages would still be there later. My own mother, scared and tired and practical, asking how I planned to raise a baby while chasing a career that offered no guarantees. No one said the words "give it up." They didn't have to. Every conversation ended in the same place. Put school on hold. Skip the auditions. Focus on the baby. Be sensible. Be grateful. Be a real woman. By the time graduation arrived, I stood in my cap and gown feeling like I was attending the funeral of a girl no one else had noticed was dying. People hugged me and smiled and talked about new chapters. My teachers asked where I had decided to enroll, and I lied with a practiced smile, saying I was taking some time first. Mrs. Bell looked at me for a long moment, as if she could hear the crack in the note even when everyone else applauded the performance. That night, Ryan held me close and told me I was doing the right thing. He kissed my forehead and said he was proud of me. I lay awake beside him with one hand over my stomach and tried to imagine that postponing a dream was not the same as surrendering it. But somewhere deep down, where the truth lives before the mind can bear it, I already knew something terrible. The baby was not the thing that changed everything. It was the moment I let other people decide what my life was worth. Noah was born on a cold morning in November. I remember the hospital window being fogged over and the sky outside looking like dull silver. Labor had lasted through the night, and by the time they finally placed him in my arms, my entire body felt like it had been wrung out and left to dry. But when he opened his eyes, something inside me softened in a way I hadn't expected. He had Ryan's dark lashes and a tiny crease between his brows like he was already trying to understand the world. I whispered his name over and over again, touching his cheek with one trembling finger.
Noah.
In that moment, nothing else seemed as important. For the first few weeks, life felt like a blur of feeding schedules, quiet lullabies, and the strange sweetness of holding a sleeping baby against your chest while the world outside continued moving without you. Ryan was attentive at first. He brought groceries, paid the hospital bills without complaint, kissed my forehead when he left for work in the mornings. At night, he would stand beside the crib and watch Noah sleeping with an expression that almost looked proud. I told myself we were going to be okay. But exhaustion changes the way a person sees the world. And motherhood, especially the kind that arrives too early, has a way of shrinking everything else. Within months, my life had become a small, repeating circle. Wake up. Feed Noah. Change Noah. Try to sleep while Noah slept. Cook something cheap.
Clean.
Rock him when he cried. Repeat. The days blurred into each other so completely that sometimes I would look up from the couch and realize it was already dark outside. Ryan's life, meanwhile, expanded. His firm started giving him more responsibility, more hours, more dinners with clients. He bought better suits, new watches, shoes that cost more than my entire monthly grocery budget. When he came home late, the apartment felt too small for his energy. At first he just seemed tired, then impatient, then quietly disappointed. It started with little comments. You used to take more care with your appearance. You should try exercising again. Other mothers manage the house better than this. Each sentence was delivered casually, like a passing observation rather than criticism. But they stacked on top of each other until they formed a wall. Sleep deprivation didn't help. Noah had colic during his first year. Some nights he cried for hours no matter what I tried. I would pace the floor with him pressed against my shoulder, humming old jazz melodies under my breath because they were the only songs that seemed to calm him. Sometimes I realized halfway, through a lullaby, that I was crying too. Ryan hated those nights. He said the noise made it impossible to rest before work. He started sleeping in the guest room more often, closing the door firmly behind him. One evening, after a particularly rough day, I was rocking Noah in the dim kitchen light when Ryan walked in and stopped short. He stared at me for several seconds. "What happened to you?" he asked. I looked down at myself. Loose sweatshirt. Hair tied back badly. Dark circles under my eyes. "I've been up since 3, I said quietly. "That's not what I mean." His voice carried that familiar calm tone, the one that sounded reasonable even when it cut. "You used to look alive," he said. "Now you just look tired all the time." The words landed harder than he probably intended. Or maybe exactly as hard as he intended. I didn't argue. I just nodded and kept rocking Noah until Ryan went to shower. That became my pattern. Silence. Every few months, I would mention singing again. Not professionally at first. Just small things. Maybe joining a local ensemble. Maybe teaching beginner lessons once Noah was older. Ryan always had an answer ready. "You're barely sleeping as it is. Music doesn't pay bills." Noah needs his mother focused on him, not chasing old fantasies. One night, after Noah had finally fallen asleep, I tried again. "I miss singing," I said. Ryan looked up from his laptop with a faint smile. "You sing all day," he said. "I hear it when I come home." "That's different."
How?
I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because those songs used to mean something." Ryan closed the laptop slowly. "Megan," he said, "not everyone gets to live their teenage dream forever." Teenage dream. The phrase felt like a door closing somewhere far away. Years passed faster than I expected. Noah grew from a baby into a small boy with curious eyes and endless questions. I loved him with a depth that frightened me sometimes. Loving him was the one part of my life that never felt smaller. Everything else did. Our apartment changed. Ryan insisted we move closer to his office, which meant higher rent and less space. My world shrank to a few blocks around the building, the grocery store, and Noah's daycare. Friends from Brookfield disappeared one by one. Some went to conservatories. Some moved to New York. Occasionally, I would see their faces on social media, smiling under stage lights. I stopped looking after a while. The cruelest moment came during Noah's 4th birthday. A few friends from Ryan's office came over with their partners. At some point, the conversation drifted toward hobbies and talents. Someone asked how Ryan and I had met. Ryan laughed lightly. "Oh, Megan used to sing back in school." "Used to." The word hung in the air. One of the women smiled politely at me. "Really? What kind of music?" Before I could answer, Ryan said, "Nothing serious. Just art school stuff."
Just art school stuff.
I felt something twist inside my chest. Later that night, after the guests left and Noah was asleep, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection. My voice had once been the first thing people noticed about me. Now, even my husband talked about it like it had been a childish phase. I leaned closer to the mirror and quietly sang one line from an old standard I used to perform. The sound that came out was soft.
Tired.
But still there. And for the first time in years, I wondered whether the person disappearing from my life wasn't my voice. It was me. The first time I cleaned Ryan's office, he didn't recognize me. Not because I looked that different, but because he never expected to see me there. It had started with money. Money always has a way of quietly rearranging people's lives until they wake up somewhere they never planned to be. Ryan's salary had grown over the years, but so had his expectations. A better apartment. Better schools for Noah. Better clothes for work. Investments. Dinners with clients that cost more than our weekly groceries. Whenever I asked about the budget, Ryan had the same answer. I'm handling it, but the truth started slipping through the cracks. Late credit card payments. Tight grocery weeks. Ryan getting irritated when I mentioned buying something as simple as new shoes for Noah. One evening he came home with a solution. You should get a job, he said. Not cruelly.
Just practically.
Noah was 5 by then and already spending most of the day at school. I had mentioned maybe finding something part-time eventually, but the way Ryan said it made it sound less like an opportunity and more like a correction. I thought we agreed I'd stay with Noah while he's little, I said carefully. Ryan shrugged as he loosened his tie. He's not a baby anymore. That was technically true, but something about the conversation made my stomach tighten. What kind of job? I asked. Ryan leaned against the kitchen counter and thought for a moment. There's a cleaning company that services the building where I work, he said. Evening shifts. It's easy work and the hours won't interfere with Noah's school schedule. I stared at him. You want me to clean offices? He frowned slightly, like he didn't understand why that bothered me. It's honest work. I know that. Then what's the problem? The problem was that once, not so long ago, I had been preparing for stages. For lights. For an audience. And now my husband was calmly suggesting I wipe down conference tables in the building where he climbed the corporate ladder. But when I opened my mouth to protest, the words didn't come out. Because part of me already believed I didn't deserve anything else. So I said yes. The job started 2 weeks later. The company gave me a gray uniform, rubber gloves, and a badge with my name printed in small black letters. My shift began at 7 in the evening, just after most of the daytime employees had gone home. Every night followed the same routine. Empty trash cans. Vacuum carpets. Wipe fingerprints off glass walls. Polish conference tables that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. The building itself was beautiful in a cold, corporate way. High ceilings. Marble floors. Soft lighting that made everything look expensive and important. Ryan worked on the 15th floor. At first I avoided going up there. But eventually my schedule rotated to include that level. The first night I stepped off the elevator, I felt a strange mix of curiosity and dread. This was the world Ryan lived in all day. The place where he made decisions, impressed clients, built the career that had slowly grown larger than our marriage. His office door had his name printed in silver letters. Ryan Cole, Senior Financial Analyst. For a moment, I just stood there looking at it. I wondered if the young girl who once sang on the Brookfield stage would recognize the woman standing in that hallway with a mop bucket. Probably not. I pushed the door open quietly. The room smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne. His desk was spotless, the city lights glowing through the large window behind it. Framed certificates hung neatly on the wall. There were no pictures of me. There was one of Noah. I started cleaning, wiping the desk, straightening a stack of papers, emptying the small trash bin beside the chair. I worked quickly, like I did in every other office. Just another room. Just another job. Then the door opened behind me. I turned. Ryan stepped inside, stopping short when he saw me. For a second his expression looked almost confused, like he was trying to understand why the cleaning staff looked familiar. Then recognition clicked into place. "Oh," he said. "Just that."
Oh.
I felt my face heat. "I thought everyone had gone home," he added. "I'm on this floor tonight," I said quietly. Ryan glanced around the room as if suddenly seeing it from a new angle. His eyes moved over the mop bucket, the cleaning cart, the gray uniform. Something unreadable passed through his expression. Then he straightened his jacket. "Well," he said, "carry on."
Carry on.
He walked past me like I was part of the furniture. That became our unspoken rule. At work, I was not his wife. I was staff. Some nights, he stayed late with colleagues and clients. When they passed me in the hallway, Ryan never introduced me. He never said my name. Sometimes he barely looked at me at all. Once I heard one of the junior analysts ask him if the cleaning crew always came this late. Ryan replied casually, "Yeah, they rotate shifts."
They.
Not Megan. Not my wife. Just they. I went home that night and stood in the kitchen long after Noah had gone to sleep. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. For years I had told myself my life had simply taken a different direction. That sacrifices were normal. That marriage meant compromise. But standing there in the dim light, one thought kept circling my mind like a song I couldn't stop hearing. Somewhere along the way, I had disappeared so completely that even the man who once promised to help me reach the big leagues could walk past me in a hallway and pretend I was no one at all. The moment everything finally cracked open didn't happen in a fight. It happened in the quietest way possible. With a sentence. Ryan's company hosted a winter gala every December, the kind of polished corporate event that existed mostly to impress investors and wealthy clients. That year it was being held at a luxury art museum in Seattle, a glass building overlooking the water, where every room glowed with soft gold lighting and expensive sculptures that no one was allowed to touch. Ryan had been talking about it for weeks. Important clients would be there. Senior partners. Potential promotions on the line. It was the biggest event of the year for the firm. One evening while we were eating dinner, he mentioned it again. "Noah will stay with my mother that night," he said casually. "The gala runs late." I looked up from my plate. "Oh," I said. "So, I'm coming?" Ryan paused. Just slightly. Then he set his fork down and wiped his mouth with a napkin in that careful, controlled way he had whenever he was about to say something unpleasant. "Megan," he said, "that's actually what I wanted to talk about." Something in my chest tightened. "I don't think it's a good idea for you to attend this year." For a second, I thought I had misunderstood him. "Why?" Ryan leaned back in his chair and studied me with the same analytical expression he used when reviewing financial reports. "It's a very high-profile event," he said. "There will be executives flying in from other cities. Important clients. People who expect a certain presentation." I stared at him. "I'm your wife." "Yes." "Then why wouldn't I come?" Ryan sighed like this conversation was already exhausting him. "Look at yourself for a moment," he said. The words felt like a slap. "I'm not trying to be cruel," he continued calmly. "But you don't exactly fit the atmosphere of an event like this anymore." My fingers tightened around my fork. "What does that mean?" Ryan gestured vaguely toward me. "You don't dress for these environments. You don't socialize with high-level clients. You've spent the last few years cleaning offices and taking care of a child. That's not exactly the kind of background people expect when they meet a partner's spouse." My ears rang. "I used to perform in front of hundreds of people," I said quietly. Ryan gave a small shrug. "That was a long time ago." The kitchen felt colder somehow. "So, you're embarrassed by me." He hesitated. Then he said the sentence that finally woke something inside me. "I'm just saying you're a little plain for this kind of event." Plain. The word landed in the center of my chest and stayed there. Ryan stood up and carried his plate to the sink like he had just finished discussing something ordinary. "It's not personal," he added. "It's just professional reality." Professional reality. I sat at the table long after he left the room. Plain. Embarrassing. Not the kind of background people expect. For years I had swallowed every insult quietly. I had let my world shrink smaller and smaller until I barely recognized the woman inside it. But that night something inside me shifted. Not dramatically. Not with anger or shouting. Just a quiet, stubborn spark that refused to go out. 2 days later, while cleaning an old drawer in the bedroom, I found my Aunt Lydia's silver bracelet. She had given it to me before she passed away. A delicate piece with small engraved leaves along the band. I hadn't worn it in years because it was one of the few things I owned that felt too precious for everyday life. I held it in my palm for a long time. Then I put it in my coat pocket. The pawn shop was 3 blocks away. The man behind the counter inspected the bracelet carefully under a small lamp. He turned it over twice, checked the clasp, then named a number that made my stomach twist. It was less than it was worth, but it was enough. Enough for a dress. Enough for shoes. Enough for one small rebellion. Over the next week, I moved quietly. Ryan didn't notice. He left early for work, came home late, and spent most evenings answering emails or talking to clients. As far as he was concerned, the gala was already settled. His wife would stay home. I used the money carefully. A modest salon appointment where a patient stylist cut my hair into something that framed my face instead of hiding it. A fitted dark blue gown from a consignment boutique. Simple, elegant, the kind of dress that didn't shout for attention but carried itself with quiet confidence. A pair of heels that made me stand straighter. The last thing I bought was lipstick. Not bright, just deep enough to remind me of the woman I used to be. The night of the gala arrived with a sharp winter wind that rattled the apartment windows. Ryan left hours earlier in a tailored tuxedo, barely glancing at me as he walked out the door. "Don't stay up," he said absently. I waited until the apartment was silent. Then I dressed slowly. The gown fit like it had been waiting for me. When I finished, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. The woman staring back at me looked unfamiliar. Not because she was glamorous, but because she looked awake. For the first time in years, my shoulders were back. My eyes were clear. My posture carried the faint echo of a girl who had once stood confidently under stage lights. I whispered something softly to my reflection. Just one night. Then I grabbed my coat and left. The museum in Seattle glowed like a glass lantern against the winter sky when I arrived. Valets moved expensive cars along the entrance, while elegant couples stepped out into the warm light of the lobby. For a moment I hesitated outside the door. Then I walked in. I didn't know yet that the night waiting for me inside would change everything. I only knew one thing. For the first time in years, I had decided not to disappear quietly. The museum lobby looked like something out of a dream I used to have when I was younger. Tall glass walls reflected the city lights outside, and the ceiling floated high above us like a cathedral made of steel and crystal. A string quartet played near the staircase, their music drifting through the room like warm air. Everywhere I looked there were black tuxedos, glittering gowns, and people who carried themselves with the easy confidence of those who had always belonged in places like this. For a moment I almost turned around, not because of the people, but because of the voice in my head that still whispered, "You don't belong here anymore." I pulled off my coat and handed it to the attendant. Then I stepped into the crowd. No one stopped me. No one questioned me. In fact, no one looked twice. That surprised me more than anything. For years I had imagined that if I ever entered a room like this again, everyone would immediately see through me. See the cleaner behind the dress. See the woman who scrubbed conference tables after midnight. But people were too busy with their own conversations, their own glasses of champagne, their own quiet negotiations. I moved through the room slowly, scanning the faces. Ryan was easy to spot. He stood near the center of the gallery surrounded by a group of men and women in expensive suits, a drink in one hand and that confident half-smile on his face. The same smile that had once convinced me he believed in my future. Now it looked different. Sharper.
Practiced.
I stayed near the doorway for a moment, watching. He looked good.
Polished.
Successful. The kind of man who seemed perfectly comfortable in rooms like this. One of the men beside him said something that made the group laugh. Ryan lifted his glass and leaned slightly toward them, clearly enjoying the attention. I took a step closer. Then another. I was still several feet away when I heard my name. Not spoken kindly. Spoken like a punchline. "My wife," Ryan was saying, his voice loose with alcohol. Someone asked something I couldn't hear. Ryan laughed. "You'd like her," he said. "She's harmless." More laughter. Another voice chimed in. "Where is she tonight?" Ryan tilted his head and swirled the drink in his glass. "Oh, she's not here," he said. "Trust me, that's for the best." Something inside me went very still. A woman in a red dress asked, amused, "Why? Is she shy?" Ryan leaned forward conspiratorially. "No," he said. "She's just not exactly gala material." The group chuckled. My stomach tightened. Then Ryan said the sentence that made the room spin slightly. "Honestly, I should have brought her just to entertain everyone." Someone raised an eyebrow. "Entertain?" Ryan grinned. "Yeah," he said. "Maybe raffle off one dance with my washed-up house mouse for spare change." For a second, no one reacted. Then the laughter came. Not cruel laughter. Just casual amusement. The kind people use when they assume everyone present is part of the joke. My ears rang. House mouse. I felt the blood drain from my face. One of the younger men pulled out his phone, already chuckling. Man, that's brutal, he said. Say that again. Ryan waved him off, but he was smiling. The man lifted the phone anyway, pointing it toward Ryan like he was capturing a funny moment.
Come on, he said.
I'm sending this to the guys. Ryan laughed again, raising his glass slightly. I said, he repeated, maybe I should raffle off a dance with my washed-up house mouse. The group erupted. Then someone near the back of the circle stopped laughing. It happened slowly. One woman turned toward the entrance behind them. Her smile faded. The man with the phone lowered it slightly. Ryan noticed the shift and frowned. What? He said. No one answered. They were all looking past him. At me. Ryan turned. Our eyes met across the space between us. For a moment, he looked confused. Then his expression froze. Because the woman standing in the doorway, the woman in the fitted dark blue gown, the heels, the quiet posture of someone who once belonged under lights, was the same person he had just called a house mouse. The silence spread outward through the group, like a ripple. Someone near the front whispered softly, "Oh my God." The man with the phone slowly lowered his arm. Ryan stared at me as if the ground beneath him had shifted. "Megan," he said. I didn't answer. I simply stood there, the cold air from the entrance still brushing the back of my neck, while every pair of eyes in that circle moved between Ryan and the woman he had just humiliated. For the first time all evening, Ryan looked uncertain. And the night was only beginning. For a moment, no one moved. The laughter that had filled the circle only seconds earlier seemed to evaporate into the high glass ceiling. Champagne glasses hovered halfway to people's lips. Someone shifted their weight awkwardly. Ryan was still staring at me. I had seen many expressions on his face over the years. Confidence, irritation, mild contempt, even boredom. But I had never seen this one.
Shock.
Megan, he said again, quieter this time. I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. The way he was trying to recover control of the situation, trying to reshape the moment before anyone decided what it meant. He cleared his throat and forced a smile that looked painfully stiff. Well, he said to the group, gesturing toward me. Speak of the devil. A few people gave uncertain chuckles. Ryan walked toward me quickly, lowering his voice the moment he reached me. What are you doing here? He hissed. His hand closed around my arm. Not violently, but firmly enough to steer me away from the circle. You weren't supposed to come. I pulled my arm back. I noticed. He glanced over his shoulder. Several of his coworkers were still watching, their curiosity thick in the air. Ryan leaned closer, his smile still pasted onto his face. You're making a scene, he murmured. A scene? I repeated quietly.
Yes.
This isn't the place for. Before he could finish, a deep voice spoke from behind him. I think it's exactly the place. Ryan stopped. We both turned. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered, and probably in his mid-40s. His dark suit was simple but clearly expensive, the kind worn by people who didn't need to impress anyone anymore. There was silver beginning to touch the edges of his hair, and his calm expression carried the weight of someone used to being listened to. I had never seen him before, but judging from the way the people nearby suddenly straightened, he was not an ordinary guest. He looked at Ryan first. I couldn't help overhearing the joke earlier, he said evenly. Ryan's smile flickered. Oh, that? Just a bit of harmless humor. The man didn't smile back. Then he turned his attention to me. His eyes softened slightly as he took in the situation. The doorway, the silence, the uncomfortable crowd pretending not to watch. And you must be Mrs. Cole, he said. His tone carried none of the awkwardness everyone else seemed trapped in. I nodded slowly. Yes. He extended his hand. Daniel Hayes. The name rippled quietly through the nearby guests. I didn't know why at first. Ryan clearly did. His posture shifted instantly. Mr. Hayes, Ryan said quickly, offering his own handshake. It's an honor to meet you. I didn't realize you were attending tonight. Daniel accepted the handshake politely but briefly. I wasn't planning to, he said. but the foundation asked if I'd stop by. Ryan nodded eagerly. Yes, of course. The fundraiser. That was when I noticed the banners near the back of the room announcing the evening's charity auction. Donations for arts education programs, scholarships, community music initiatives. The irony almost made me laugh. Daniel looked between Ryan and me again. Then he spoke in the same calm tone. I believe you were discussing raffling off a dance. Ryan blinked. Well. Daniel reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded check. The motion was slow, deliberate. He turned toward one of the event coordinators standing nearby and handed it to her. This should help the fundraiser, he said. The woman looked down at the number. Her eyes widened. Even from where I stood, I could see the line of zeros stretching across the paper. The room shifted again. Whispers spread. Daniel turned back toward us. I believe that amount should cover the cost of one dance, he said. Ryan stared at him. Excuse me?
Daniel looked directly at me.
If you're willing, he said gently, I'd be honored to claim the prize. The silence around us deepened. Someone near the bar whispered, Did he just? Ryan's face flushed slightly. That's not necessary, he said quickly. It was just a joke. Daniel's gaze moved back to him. Jokes tend to lose their humor when the subject is standing in the doorway, he replied. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it again. The string quartet near the staircase shifted into a slower song. Daniel offered his hand to me. May I? For a moment I hesitated, not because I was afraid, but because the entire night felt unreal. Less than 15 minutes ago, I had been standing outside wondering if I belonged here at all. Now one of the most powerful men in the room was waiting patiently for my answer. Ryan looked like he wanted to object, but the watching crowd made it impossible. So I placed my hand in Daniel Hayes's. Yes, I said softly. He led me toward the dance floor. Behind us, the whispers followed like falling snow. Daniel Hayes danced like a man who understood silence. Not the awkward kind that fills a room when people don't know what to say, but the quiet that appears when two strangers recognize something fragile in each other. The music from the quartet drifted slowly across the polished floor while he guided me through the steps with effortless calm. His hand rested lightly at the center of my back, steady but respectful, as if he knew this moment was less about dancing and more about giving me space to breathe again. Behind us, the room buzzed with curiosity. I could feel the eyes, the whispers. Ryan standing somewhere in that crowd, watching the woman he had just mocked glide across the floor beside a man whose name carried weight in every corner of the room. But Daniel didn't look back.
He focused on me.
You handled that with remarkable composure, he said quietly. I let out a small breath. I didn't feel very composed. Most people would have run. I almost did. He nodded once, as if that answer made perfect sense. The music ended softly. Instead of returning me to the center of the room, Daniel tilted his head toward a quiet hallway lined with glass doors. Would you mind stepping outside for a moment? He asked. The rooftop garden is peaceful this time of year. I hesitated for only a second. Then I followed him. The rooftop sat above the museum like a hidden sanctuary. Snow had begun falling lightly, dusting the stone paths and the dark branches of small ornamental trees. Lanterns hung along the railing, their warm glow reflecting against the glass walls and the distant lights of Seattle. The city stretched out below us like a sea of gold. Cold air brushed against my cheeks, clearing the tightness that had been sitting in my chest all evening. Daniel leaned against the railing, giving me enough space that I didn't feel cornered. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said something that surprised me. You're a singer. It wasn't a question. I looked at him. How do you know that? He smiled faintly. I grew up around musicians, he said. You carry yourself like someone who has spent time on stage. The words hit somewhere deep inside me. I used to sing, I said. Daniel shook his head gently. No, he replied. You still do. I looked away toward the falling snow. For years, whenever anyone asked about music, I had given the same answer Ryan used. Used to. Past tense. Safe. Finished. But standing there in the cold night air, something loosened in my chest. My life changed, I said quietly. Daniel didn't interrupt. So I told him. Not everything. Just enough. About Brookfield Academy. About the teachers who believed in me. About the pregnancy before graduation. About the slow years that followed. The shrinking world. The cleaning job in Ryan's building. The words came slowly at first, then faster. Daniel listened without reacting, without pity, without the awkward sympathy people sometimes give when they don't know how to fix what they're hearing. When I finished, the snow had started falling harder. He looked out over the city for a moment. My sister loved music, he said. The softness in his voice told me immediately that she was gone. She had the kind of talent that fills a room, he continued. But our family didn't have much money when we were young. She worked 2 jobs to help support us while still trying to perform. He paused. She passed away before she ever had the chance to build the life she wanted. I didn't know what to say. Daniel turned back toward me. Before she died, she talked about opening a foundation someday, he said. A place that would support women whose talents had been buried under responsibilities they didn't choose. The wind lifted a strand of my hair across my cheek. A nice dream, I said quietly. Yes, he said. Then he looked at me with a seriousness that made my heart skip. So I built it. I blinked. What? The Hayes Foundation, he said simply. Scholarships. Residencies. Training programs. Most of the people in that ballroom downstairs are here tonight because they're donating to it. I remembered the banners. The fundraiser. The cause that had brought him here tonight. Daniel studied my face carefully. Tell me something, Megan, he said. What? Do you still sing? I hesitated. The truth felt fragile. Sometimes, I admitted. To my son. When he can't sleep. Daniel nodded slowly. Would you sing something now? My first instinct was to refuse. The rooftop was quiet. The night air cold. And somewhere below us was a room full of people who had already seen me humiliated once. But Daniel wasn't asking for a performance. He was asking for the truth. So I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I hummed the opening line of an old jazz standard I used to sing at Brookfield. Soft. Gentle. Just enough to let the melody exist in the air. When I finished, the rooftop was silent again. Daniel exhaled slowly. Well, he said, almost to himself. What? I asked. He smiled in a way that felt both warm and decisive. Your voice isn't gone, he said. No one loses something like that completely. I looked down at the snowy stone beneath my shoes. Even if that's true, I said, it's too late. Daniel shook his head. No, he said calmly. It's not. I looked up. And then he made an offer that would change the direction of my life. If you're willing, he said, I can help you start again. The words felt impossible. What do you mean? My foundation has housing for resident artists, he explained. We work with legal advisors, coaches, instructors. My hotel downtown hosts live music every night in the lounge, and we often give performers paid residencies while they rebuild their careers. Snowflakes settled quietly on his shoulders. I can offer you a place to stay, he continued. Professional vocal training. Legal help if you need it. And a chance to sing again in front of people who actually want to listen. The world seemed to tilt slightly. You don't even know me, I said. Daniel's expression remained calm. I know enough, he replied. Then he added one final sentence. And I know what it looks like when someone's gift has been buried instead of lost. I didn't answer Daniel that night. Not because I didn't want to, but because after years of living inside a small, controlled world, the idea of stepping outside it felt almost dangerous. Instead, I thanked him for the dance, for the conversation, and for the kindness he had shown when the room had turned cruel. He didn't push. Before we went back downstairs, he handed me a simple card with his name and number. If you decide you want your life back, he said gently, call me. Then he left the rooftop first, giving me time to breathe. I stayed there another minute, listening to the snow hit the stone, and wondering if I had just been offered a door I was too afraid to walk through. The next morning, everything looked different. Ryan was already in the kitchen when I woke up, standing stiffly beside the coffee machine. He didn't say good morning. He waited until Noah had left for school before speaking. What the hell was last night? His voice was sharp, stripped of the polite control he used around clients. I poured myself coffee before answering. You mean when you called me a house mouse in front of your coworkers? Ryan ran a hand through his hair. I told you that was a joke. You told it twice. That's not the point. I looked at him across the kitchen. No, I said calmly. It is. His eyes narrowed. You humiliated me. The irony of that sentence almost made me laugh. I humiliated you? You showed up uninvited, created a scene, and then let Daniel Hayes parade you around like some charity project. The name hung in the air. So Ryan knew exactly who Daniel was. I didn't ask him to do anything, I said. Ryan scoffed.
Please.
Men like him don't throw money around unless they want something. There it was. Suspicion. Ownership.
Control.
For years those things had defined our marriage, so quietly that I had almost stopped noticing them. But something had shifted inside me the night before. Ryan saw it. His tone softened slightly. Look, he said, let's just forget about it. These things happen. Just don't do something like that again. That was the moment I understood something important. He didn't feel sorry. He felt inconvenienced. I set my coffee down. I'm leaving. Ryan frowned. What? I'm taking Noah and leaving. For a second, he simply stared at me. Then he laughed. A short, dismissive sound. You're not serious. I am. Ryan leaned against the counter. And where exactly are you planning to go? I thought of the card sitting on my nightstand. I'll figure it out. Ryan shook his head slowly. Megan, you can't even support yourself. You clean offices. Not for long. The confidence in my voice surprised both of us. Ryan's smile faded. You're not taking my son anywhere. Our son. Don't start that, he snapped. You think some rich man at a party is going to rescue you? I didn't answer, but the silence told him enough. Ryan's expression hardened. If you walk out that door, he said, I'll make sure you regret it. 3 days later, I called Daniel. Not because I wanted rescue, but because I finally understood something. I didn't need someone to save me. I needed someone who wouldn't stop me from saving myself. Daniel didn't sound surprised when he heard my voice. Within a week, things moved faster than I could have imagined. His foundation arranged temporary housing for me and Noah in one of the artist apartments near his hotel. The place was small but warm, filled with people rebuilding pieces of their lives through music, art, and writing. For the first time in years, I woke up in a place where creativity wasn't treated like a childish phase. Then came the lawyers. Ryan kept his promise. The moment he realized I was serious about leaving, he fought back hard. He accused me of being unstable, of abandoning my responsibilities, of chasing unrealistic fantasies instead of focusing on motherhood. His mother, Diane, called twice to inform me that I was destroying my son's future. But Daniel's legal team had already seen men like Ryan before. They collected records, financial documents, messages, proof of the years I had spent raising Noah while Ryan built his career. The court process dragged on for months. Ryan tried intimidation, tried insults, tried convincing me I would fail. But something inside me had already crossed the point of no return. Every morning I worked with a vocal coach Daniel had introduced me to, a strict woman named Carmen who believed discipline was the fastest path back to confidence. At first my voice trembled. Years of neglect had left it weaker than before. But the foundation was still there. Slowly, note by note, breath by breath, the sound came back. Not exactly the same. Stronger. By the time the divorce papers were finalized, I had my own small residency singing at Daniel's boutique hotel lounge. The audience wasn't huge, but every night people listened. And every night when I stepped onto that small stage, I felt something returning piece by piece. My voice, my dignity, my life. Ryan had once told me my dreams were a teenage fantasy. Standing under the warm lounge lights, microphone in my hand, I realized something quietly powerful. He had been wrong. The first time I sang on a real stage again, my hands trembled. Not visibly. Years of training had taught me how to hide nerves from an audience. But inside, My heart was beating the same way it had when I was 17, standing behind the curtains at Brookfield Academy waiting for my cue. Only this time, the stage was bigger. Much bigger. It was a theater in Chicago, an old historic hall with red velvet seats and golden balconies that curved like waves around the room. The air backstage smelled faintly of wood polish and stage lights heating the curtains. Outside, every seat was filled. Sold out. Even now, years later, the idea still feels surreal when I say it. My name was on the posters. Megan Carter Hayes, Winter Night Concert. The journey from that rooftop garden in Seattle to this stage had not been easy. There had been months of rebuilding my voice. Countless rehearsals. Performances in smaller rooms that slowly grew into larger ones. But the most important change hadn't been the size of the audience. It had been the quiet stability of the life around me. Daniel never tried to control my career. He supported it. When we married 2 years after the divorce was finalized, the ceremony was small and private. Noah stood beside us wearing a tiny suit and holding my hand like he had been waiting for that moment his whole life. Daniel never tried to replace Ryan in Noah's life. But he became something far better. A steady presence. A man who showed my son what respect looked like. By the time Noah turned 10, he had started learning piano in the same hotel lounge where I once sang my first comeback performance. Sometimes he played while I practiced. Sometimes he just sat in the corner doing homework while the music filled the room. That was the life I had built. Not perfect, but honest. The stage manager knocked softly on the dressing room door. 5 minutes. I nodded and stood up. My dress that night was simple, deep emerald velvet that caught the light when I moved. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. I had learned over the years that confidence doesn't need decoration. As I stepped toward the curtain, I glanced out through the narrow gap toward the audience. That's when I saw them. Ryan
And Diane.
They were sitting near the back of the theater in the cheap seats. I almost didn't recognize them at first. Ryan looked older than I remembered. His posture was tighter, his expression less confident. The polished shine that had once surrounded him seemed dulled. Beside him, Diane sat stiffly with her coat folded across her lap, her eyes fixed on the stage. I later learned they had only bought the tickets out of curiosity after seeing the advertisements around the city. They hadn't known the concert had sold out weeks in advance. And they definitely hadn't expected to end up sitting in the far back row. For a moment, I simply watched them. Not with anger. Not even with satisfaction. Just with a quiet sense of distance. Because the truth was simple. They no longer had power over my life. The house lights dimmed. The curtain rose. The applause started before I even reached the microphone. It rolled through the theater like thunder. For a brief second, I closed my eyes and felt the sound wash over me. Then I began to sing. The first song was the same jazz standard I had hummed on that snowy rooftop years earlier. But this time the melody filled the entire theater. My voice carried easily across the room, warm and controlled, rising and falling with the music the way it had always been meant to. Every note felt like reclaiming something. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just truth. Midway through the concert, the spotlight softened, and I stepped forward slightly. "This next song," I said gently, "is for anyone who was ever told their dream had an expiration date." The audience grew quiet. I didn't look toward the back of the theater. I didn't need to. I already knew they were there. The final note of the song hung in the air for a moment before the entire theater erupted.
People stood.
Applauding. Some cheering. Some wiping tears from their faces. I bowed once. Then again. In the distance, I could see 2 figures still seated in the far back row, frozen in the realization of what they were watching. The woman they had dismissed. The voice they had tried to bury. The life they had told me was over. I didn't feel the need to confront them. I didn't need to prove anything. Because the truth was already written across the stage lights, the music, and the thousands of people standing in that theater. When the curtain finally fell, I took one last look at the empty seats and allowed myself a small, calm smile. I hadn't destroyed Ryan. He had destroyed himself. And I had simply walked forward into the life that was waiting for me all along.